Albert. How are you?
Good morning, guys. How we doing?
We are awesome. We've got a quarterback. He is ascending. We all knew he was going to be good, but, boy, he was outstanding. And I know it's the Panthers, but you still have to look at him. And, like, I was talking to Hoodie about this, Albert. The second touchdown where he looks to the right, he looks off, he drags that safety over, and then you can almost from another angle see a smile like, got ya. And he goes right over the top with a great throw to DJ Moore where it's either caught or it's incomplete. That is growth, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think like the biggest thing is the 2 touchdown throws to DJ Moore. Obviously, both of them were outstanding, right? Like, but you know, on top of that, they're thrown within structure and rhythm as part of the offense. And we all know what he can do, you know, as far as scrambling and getting away and throwing from different arm angles and all the stuff that we saw at USC and Oklahoma. We know, right? Like, you know, he can do the Mahomes stuff. What'll really weaponize that stuff is if he's using it sparingly and he's doing it every now and again rather than all the time, which I think like last year, if you go watch him at USC, he had to do it too much because the team around him wasn't very good. And, you know, I think learning how to play the position that way, learning to play within the offense, there's a reason why it didn't look very good the first few weeks because and look, like, I think the best way to describe this is like they took almost like a Colts in 1998 approach to how they were handling Caleb, which you need to know your guys got confidence to do it that way. Not every young quarterback can handle it, but they had confidence that he could. And what that approach is like, let him go out and make his mistakes. Peyton Manning, I think, broke the NFL record for interceptions his rookie year. And, you know, it would have made a lot of other quarterbacks crumble to play that way. But the amount of reps and time on task Peyton Manning got accelerated his development to the point where in year 2, they won 13 games, right? So the Colts were willing to go through bumps and felt like Peyton Manning could handle those bumps and would learn from them. And I think that's sort of been the Caleb Williams experience was like, let's let him learn through it. Let's let him fight through it. Let's let him fall down and skin his knee a little bit and let him grow up a little bit the hard way. And, you know, I think you saw a lot of things come together on Sunday. You know, you can do that too if you're the Bears because you don't need a team that needs him to throw for. You have a team that doesn't need him to throw for 300 yards every week to win a game. You know, like they can win different ways. And you know, we saw it against the Titans where, you know, it was a blocked kick and or a blocked punt and a pick six. We saw it against the Rams in a number of different ways. Jaquan Brisker has the interception at the end to salt that one away. And, you know, now this week, you know, like you go out and throw for 300 to win. So I think there's good logic to the way they were going to do it. There's no guarantee that it's going to work, but it does seem like they turned a corner on Sunday.
Albert, in your takeaways on SI.com, we ask you to go to SI.com and check out Albert Breer as he goes through his takeaways and some of the highlights of this past weekend. What's the difference in the Commanders' weapons and the Bears' weapons? Because you wrote about Jayden Daniels. I mean, he's one of the great surprises of the NFL, but why is he doing well? And compare what the Bears have to the Commanders, because ultimately these quarterbacks, the way that they're going to be able to flourish is because they've got weapons and difference makers that can help them out.
Yeah, so I think they're very different situations. You know, like the Commanders are in year 1. The Commanders are also doing a little bit more schematically to come to Jayden Daniels' side. And hiring Cliff Kingsbury was a move made to build an offense specifically for Jayden Daniels. Now you're going to have to keep evolving that, but you know, the Commanders made a very real effort to meet him halfway. Not saying the Bears aren't doing those things. It's just the Commanders sort of did it wholesale, you know, in hiring Cliff and bringing in a lot of the college concepts to do it. And part of it is that they had to do that because their tackle situation, you know, in Washington has been a mess the last few years. And beyond Terry McLaurin, they don't have a lot at the skill positions. And so they were going to have to win with scheme a little bit more. Here's the other part of it. And I think, you know, because of COVID, because of the transfer portal, we're seeing this a lot more. They just had very different college experiences. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you look at like Caleb, and Caleb played at 2 blue bloods, right? And until like Caleb's third year, Caleb was playing with, better players than his opponents had on a pretty consistent basis. So whether it was Oklahoma or SC, 9 times out of 10, he was going out there with the best team in the field. Now that changed for Caleb in his last year, but that was his college experience. He only played 3 years, and he had, I think, under 30 starts. Jayden Daniels played his first 3 years at Arizona State, where you had average talent around you. His second year was COVID, so he only played 4 games his second year. His third year, the Arizona State program was a freaking crime scene. With all the stuff that was going on with the violations and everything else.
Yeah.
And then he transfers to LSU, where now all of a sudden he does have better weapons than everybody. So you got to see both sides of the fence, right? So you got to play with a team that he had to sort of carry as a young player, and then he goes over to LSU, and now he doesn't have to do that anymore because he's throwing to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. And through all of that, played in 2 separate power conferences, was a multi-year starter at 2 separate Power 5 teams, started 55 games, played 5 years, had been knocked down, had to get back up. It's just a very different experience. So I just think Jayden Daniels comes into the league more prepared than Caleb because he's seen a lot more than Caleb does. And that's no fault of Caleb's, but it's just a very, very different sort of thing going into the pro. So I would say, because of all the different changing dynamics in college football, those 2 guys had very, very different college experiences.
All right. I want to ask you about the upcoming trade deadline about a month away, November 5. We'll come back to Albert because could the Bears be active? That's next. Now Tevin Jenkins is banged up. So at the trade deadline or before, the Browns, they got salary issues with what's going on with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Is there a player, whether it's Cleveland or someone else, Indianapolis maybe, I don't know, Braden Smith, is there an O-lineman that would be a major upgrade that they could use the Carolina pick or their second-round pick, their own, and get somebody in here?
I can't remember. Maybe you guys can help me out here. I can't remember the last time an offensive lineman, a more than a backup, was traded in season. Can you?
When was Trent Williams traded?
Well, he was in. That was at the draft. So
that was at the draft. Got it.
Yeah, that was April, late April. I think it was on the 3rd day of the draft that he was traded, and that was he wanted out. Generally, these things don't happen. Do not happen in season. And the reason why is because the Bears have the same problem everybody has, which is there just aren't enough offensive linemen to go around. Even good teams, even the really good teams, have an injury, and it can create a huge problem. So I hate to give you this answer, but I think it's just the reality of it is that if you have good ones, you don't let them go. And so, what you would be looking for is there some team that has a surplus where there's a offensive lineman on their roster we might have liked in the preseason, and maybe that guy is in a contract here, so a team is willing to flip him for a pick. That's really it, And so what teams have been really good at developing linemen? You mentioned Cleveland. Cleveland would be one. They wouldn't give you a starter, but maybe, when Jedrick Wills is back in there now, when Jack Conklin's healthy, could you get one of the tackles who had played for them over the last couple of years when those guys have been hurt? Maybe get something like that, but I can't imagine it will be anything more than that, And even then, teams are really reluctant to give up their depth at these positions because it's so hard to find.
Albert, the quarterback that is always flying under the radar, it's Trevor Lawrence. Can we have a definitive answer on what is Trevor Lawrence? That first year with Urban Meyer disaster and what's happening with the ball club now, they're 1-4. They were able to beat the Colts. What is Trevor Lawrence in the NFL as far as the hierarchy of quarterbacks?
Seems like an existential question there, Huddy. I feel like you're putting a big one on my plate here. What is Trevor Lawrence?
Yes. It's Jeopardy. It's Jeopardy.
Yeah, I hear what I would say. So, I think maybe it's time to put to bed the idea that he was the. And look, I was first in line to say this, but this is how he was seen coming out. But the Peyton Manning, John Elway thing, he's a once in every, 10 years type of prospect. We see the same things about Caleb, and we'll see if he lives up to that. But it's a high bar, and I think that's part of the issue is that we've all been holding him to that bar. I think there is a bigger problem in Jacksonville. So obviously the first year you got the Urban Meyer issue. I think now, if you just look at their roster, I think they've paid a lot of good players great money, and that's a tough spot to be in, right? So Christian Kirk, good player. Is he worth $20 million a year? Probably not, right? Cam Robinson, good offensive lineman. Is he the Trent Williams, to borrow your example, that you're building an offensive line around? Probably not. And there are examples of this all over that team's roster. And so I just sort of look at it, and it's like they're paying all of these guys, and then they're asking, as a result, Trevor to be Superman, and he hasn't been able to be Superman quite yet, which is understandable this early in his career. I'm sort of starting to wonder, is the Trevor Lawrence story going to play out like the Matthew Stafford story? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Right? Like where a lot of people watched Matthew in Detroit and refused to and kept divorcing him from his situation, right? Like they continued to say, well, Matthew hasn't been good enough for a number one overall pick. Is he ever going to be good enough? And the reality was he was a really good player who was doing what he could, but it just, like the situation around him wasn't good enough to take him to the next level. And then he gets in a better situation and it really works. That's sort of what I've started to think with Trevor Lawrence is like, is Trevor Lawrence sort of becoming what Matthew Stafford was in Detroit, where he's a good player, a really good player, and a guy who you can probably win a Super Bowl with, but he just hasn't been in the type of situation that can support him in that way. And again, like there are very few young quarterbacks that can rise above their circumstances. The one I always think of is Andrew Luck, right? Like where Andrew Luck didn't have a great situation around him early in his career, yet he was still going to the playoffs. There are very few quarterbacks who can do that. Like we never had to see that from Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, because those guys, they may have been able to do it, but we didn't have to see it because those guys were all in really good situations. It's rare you find a guy who can overcome a bad circumstance. And, I think that's sort of where Trevor Lawrence has been. Not a horrible circumstance the last couple of years under Doug Peterson, but not an ideal one.
Albert, have a great week, man. We'll be watching you Thursday night. I keep telling people that guy's a star, and he's our friend.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. I don't know if that's the truth, but thanks for saying that.
You'll be a star when you put on the Will McDonough hat. When you put the hat on,
I need to get the scallop cap. You're right. Absolutely. I gotta wait. I gotta wait to get outside and for it to get cold, though. I don't know if it'd be appropriate to wear it in my office. I'd look like like Scoops Callahan from 1925 if I did that.
What is that dude doing? Hey, man, have a great day. Good week.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, see you.
All right.
There he is.